just pick a hero and get good at that hero. And lose some SR like a man, you know? Lose your games like a man. Great. They can't win it fair, so they gotta cringe it up, you know. There's a Zarya. It's okay, we wanted to swap anyway. I'd rather play Winston into Reaper than Junker Queen into Zarya. Any day of the week, actually. They swapped a D.Va before... Man, just like, it's frustrating, this psychology. This I'm just gonna play whatever counters you, you know? I'm gonna stick to Winston on this part of the map because I can play against a brain-dead D.Va. On third, I will have to swap, though. Can we not just stick to two heroes that are relatively even play against each other and then see who's better at the game? I mean, the movie's so weird because it's about making a movie anyway, right? So, like, having tropes and having cliche things is, like, actually fine. You can rely... If the type of movie is weird, you can kind of get away with using those things a little bit more. Fire one. Oh, now they're on Brig, too. I'm gonna beat these guys on Winston. Alright. Fuck. Oh, I get booped off? No! Like, look at these dummies, man. I'm probably just gonna die on Kari here and then swap. I'll use my ultimate. I'm just gonna die on cart until they kill me. Break, break, break. Reaper on cart. Nice, it took them, I don't know, a full minute and a half to clear a monkey off a cart. And they're playing 4 counters, like, come on now. Nice job, nerd. Watch him swap to Zarya now. Oh, fuck. Alright, it was a big brain play, actually. I'm going back to the spawn room faster, so that when they swap Zarya, I can, yep, there it is. We'll swap back to Monkey. It was actually just a big brain play. Chinolo. And then they swap back to D.Va. What a cringe motherfucker, man. Win in the hero select screen and never get better at the game. Okay. Good job, bro. Good job. This is so cringe, man. I hate that people are like, okay, let's just switch to the right character. Like, why do people, we don't have to do this. And I lose to people who are much worse at the game than me. And it fucking sucks. It's just like they held tab a little bit longer and waited for me to swap. Like, I'm just trying to play a character that's viable. They're trying to like just make my life miserable. That's the difference. Like, I'm swapping back between two characters just to try and be like, okay, I can't actually play the game on this character, so I'll swap to this character. I can't play the game on this character, so I'll swap to this character. And I'm lucky. They roll out on Zarya. Brig low. They use bubble. Juno low. Nice, nice. We get a tick. That's actually massive. We get mega. Re-engaging here. Reaper or no Wraith, they use a bubble for it. There's Diva! Cassidy, Brig, I'm gonna outplay these guys. I just gotta be better. There she is. I fly at Golira. Oh fuck, I dropped the bubble. It was a really bad misclick. Oh man, if I lose the game because of that, I'm gonna be frustrated. Shoot Cass. Cass low, Cass low. I'm on Brig next. Brig low, Brig low. Brig really low.
Baby Diva.
No! I ain't taking a minute. This is just fucking stupid, man. Like, you're so cringe. You're cringe motherfucker, and you just go play a game that you can get free SR because you can switch to the right hero. Good job. Like, they're so brain dead this whole game, and they beat me because that's what the game is right now. Counterwatch is by far the largest issue in Overwatch 2. It is the most hated part of the game, the most frustrating part of the game. It makes me want to scream, break my keyboard, and go cry in the shower sometimes. It is frustrating with how little of a response we have gotten to Counterwatch from the Overwatch 2 balance team. Many of the patches do not directly make these interactions, these harsh matchups, better. They often move numbers around, and if a counter is softened, it doesn't seem like it was intentionally so. I'm not just going to complain about Counterwatch. I think there's been quite enough of that as it is. Even though I am a Winston one-trick, or I used to be a Winston one-trick, I found it impossible to one-trick my favorite character in the last few months and given up on it recently. I have experienced probably the worst of Counterwatch alongside maybe Wrecking Ball players, as we both have the most counters in the game and are the most commonly countered characters in the game. So I speak from a Winston perspective, a fair and skillful tank that gets pushed out by much less fair, much less skillful characters. I speak from a place of frustration, but I also intend on coming to conclusions and finding some solutions for these problems. And hopefully the dev team listens to our unanimous outcry finally and starts to directly tackle the issue at hand rather than dance around it by changing numbers and seeing what's going to happen. Not all of these solutions need to be put in place. These are just several ideas that can be implemented individually or mixed and matched to lessen the potency and frequency of counter swapping in Overwatch 2. My first solution, change the pain points of the counter matchups. If you are a Spylo watcher, you are familiar with the language. I will not try to hide that I have stolen some of the language and ideology behind these changes from him, but I've come to my own unique solutions. Definitely go check out his content. He is one of the best Overwatch 2 creators out there. We need to identify the pain points in the hardest counter matches and see where we can pull back on how harsh those interactions are. I was very encouraged to see in the latest developer update that they were looking at some of this. They were looking at beams into abilities like Matrix, into abilities like Sig's Suck, Deflect, etc., and their effectiveness into those abilities. They didn't say exactly how they were going to change that, but let's say it's like a 50% damage reduction when you're shooting a Zarya beam into a D.Va Matrix. Zarya is still good against D.Va in that scenario, but it softens the counter matchup. My goal here is not to remove counters entirely, that's impossible, but to alleviate some of the frustrations and painful parts of these matchups. A couple of my own suggestions for Winston and characters that get shredded by shotguns and high spread weapons. Maybe we can start changing the damage dependent ratio for these shotguns and high spread weapons to make it less effective against armor. This will largely affect tanks, and we should incentivize these characters to land mechanically skillful shots on squishier, smaller targets and make that more rewarding, and lessen the effectiveness of landing the easy shot on the big character. I will say the balance team has done some of this. They've lessened damage and lessened spread on a lot of these weapons, but I think we need to pull back a little bit further because it still feels miserable to play Winston into the same characters that he had trouble with before. Maybe characters can get a reduced self-heal against anti-nade. They still can't be healed by their supports, but can get half healing from their own self-healing abilities like JQ wounds or Hogs Take a Breather, so that these characters that really rely on the self-healing to sustain themselves and to be effective aren't completely destroyed by landing a relatively easy to land ability. Though, keep in mind, anti-nade would still be good against these heroes in these situations, it just wouldn't crush them so easily. Let's look at Reinhardt. What's Reinhardt's biggest challenge? It's obviously Orisa. What if he dealt impact damage that wasn't reduced by Orisa's Fortify when he hits her? He doesn't charge her, he still gets his pin stopped, but he gets some damage onto the Orisa. For Reinhardt again, Life Grip is something that can easily take away value from a character that finds value very hard to get. For example, landing a pin is very, very difficult. Sometimes, most of the times. And Grip is very easy to use. What if Reinpin just overrode Grip? That seems reasonable to me. You could still grip the target after they've been pinned if they don't die. So the ability would still be effective and useful against Reinhardt pin, but it wouldn't immediately make the Reinhardt player throw his keyboard to the ground and scream at the top of his lungs. What if Sombra Hack allows you to stay in ball form, but not use the CDs as it does now? So you could still kind of roll away a little bit faster. These aren't all the changes that would need to be made, and it's not necessarily these changes that need to be made, but let's start making these types of changes that are directly looking at the problem and trying to solve it in some way. Instead, what we've been doing is globally changing things and hoping that these problems get sorted out. One of the worst offenders of this is the tank knockback passive. The tank knockback passive unequally affects different tanks in the cast. For example, Reinhardt and Winston benefit out of having a higher knockback reduction than Malga or Hog or Orisa or Sigma, who can still do damage from range. So maybe we give Winston and Reinhardt and characters like that need to be really close and who get punished by the boops a little bit more. Maybe we give them a little bit more knockback reduction. Maybe we give characters like Sigma almost no knockback reduction. In general, we need less global passive abilities and more individualized, well thought out abilities that we can individually tune and change to make that character feel the way that they should feel in the game. Armor has been an interesting experiment lately. We had 30% damage reduction. Before that, we had the Overwatch 1 armor, which is a 5 damage reduction per instance of damage. And now we're basically back to that, but we've increased the effectiveness of it. We went up to 10 damage. reduction, and now we're down to 7. And I'm sure you all have noticed when it was 10 damage reduced per instance of damage, characters like Soldier and Lucio felt awful to shoot armor with. But characters like Junkrat and Pharah pretty much ignored armor entirely. We should not have characters that are exceptionally bad at shooting armor, and we should not have characters that are exceptionally good at shooting armor. We should try to decrease the range of effectiveness against armor across the cast. And by that I mean the character who is worst against armor, Tracer for example, shouldn't be that much worse at shooting armor than the best character at shooting armor, Junkrat. There should be a narrower range. It is okay for certain characters to be worse at shooting armor than others. High spread weapons, high fire rate weapons, if those are effective at shooting armor, tanks get shredded very easily. So of course those need to be held back by armor a little bit more. However, there is a huge inconsistency when we look at Pharah rockets and Junkrat bombs hitting tanks for pretty much their full damage. It feels really, really bad to play into that. It feels really inconsistent. It feels awful to play tank into Junkrat right now. And it has since they reverted the armor change. I'm going to steal once again from Coach Spilo because I don't think there is a better solution out there for this, a better long-term solution for armor. There is a maximum reduction that armor can have, which is 50%. I'm not going to go into this. It's 2024. You should know how armor works. And Spilo suggests that there should also be a minimum amount that armor reduces. So let's say that's 15%. So when Junkrat hits you with a shot for 125 damage, and armor tries to take off 7 damage, there's a check that says, is 7 less than 15%? Yes, it is. So we're going to instead reduce it by 15%, which would be around 19 damage. That's going to make armor feel a lot more consistent and feel like it actually does something against all heroes. It's less effective against Junkrat still than it is against Tracer, but it seems much more fair. My next suggestion is we need to raise the lowest skill floor on tanks significantly. People are able to play 5-6 different tanks and swap to Orisa, Hog, Diva, Ramatra, these low skill floor tanks, because they're so accessible. It doesn't really matter if I only have 10 hours on Malga. I know how to play the character effective enough to counter the enemy tank. What if we raise the skill floor to where if I don't know what I'm doing on Malga, I'm going to get punished. So if the skill floor is higher, people are not going to have enough time to master 5 or 6 different heroes, and they will have to stick to maybe their 2 or 3 heroes. The target skill floor should require players to commit to a narrower group of tanks, and this alone I think will solve a lot of the issues from game to game. The last two suggestions that I have are more psychological than practical. I think we need to take away the ultimate charge retained when swapping. Now that ultimate charge is only 15%, I don't think it is very impactful, but I think since Counterwatch is so complained about and is the biggest problem that we face, let's help that in any way that we can. How many players would hesitate to counter swap if that ult charge retention wasn't there? Wouldn't they wait to ult a little bit more? If you remember, this counter swapping psychology didn't come about until they initially introduced the ultimate charge retention. Players have always counter swapped, but there was definitely a huge spike in frequency and even potency when it was at 25%, and that never really went away. Let's pull back on that. Let's just remove that entirely. We need as much help as we can get to fix this issue, and this seems like one of the easiest things that we can change, and I'm just curious, will this change the experience of the game? The game worked fine before without this ultimate charge retention. I really don't see a need for it. I would like to experiment and see if this lessens the frequency of counter swap. Additionally, what if there was a limit to hero swaps? This has been thrown around a few times. Players don't really like that. Devs kind of see that problematic. What if we put the number pretty high though? What if it was 10? Psychologically, players might think before swapping because now it is a limited resource. Even though practically there's not really any time in an Overwatch game where I've swapped 10 times. Only in the most extreme cases have I ever seen that kind of swapping happen. But yeah, even if you set the number unreasonably high, will people treat that as a limited resource and hesitate a little bit more when they are trying to switch characters? Or this could be a practical change. We could set it lower at like maybe 6 or 8, where it actually is a limited resource. We could set a timer on it. Something needs to happen here where we limit the ability to win the game in the spawn room. It's not fun. It's extremely frustrating to feel like you are more skillful than the enemy tank, but they rolled out to the last fight on Hog, and you rolled out to the last fight on Winston. We need to try to make the game more about skill and less about what you play. Overwatch, I think, has always been about how you play, not what you play necessarily, but I've found that to be less and less true as time goes on, because the effectiveness and frequency of counter swapping is out of control. If we coordinate, play a good game, and lose a game, you know, I'm pretty happy. It's this, like, emotional immaturity that just really starts to piss me off and wear me down. And it's adult men. Everybody is like, oh, the kids are fine. Kids are always fine. Almost always, kids are fine. They have more emotional maturity than these 30-year-old diaper poop bucket boys, you know?